Hello and welcome to Live Your Language Tips and Inspiration for Your Bilingual Life. I'm Stephanie, a PhD student in second language acquisition and a mother to two children that I'm raising to be trilingual in my non-native languages of French, Spanish, and my native language of English. And today I am going to get you guys up to speed because it's been 2 years since I've posted an update video and a lot has happened. So I'm going to talk about the progress my children have made in each language and how each language stands in our household and who is learning which language from who. And then I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that we've had, and then I'm going to talk about some of the ideas that I have going forward for improvement. But first, since it's been so long, I think it's really important to go through a timeline just so that you all know where we left off. So in our last update video, it was about August 2023, and my son, my oldest, had just finished his first year of preschool at a Spanish-immersion preschool. So we moved and then we started him in a English-speaking part-time preschool. So when he wasn't there or in the afternoons, he would be with our Spanish-speaking au pair. My youngest, who was 2 at the time, was staying with her all the time. So he got all Spanish input all day long, whereas my oldest got maybe like half a day. So that continued until June 2024, when the kids were out for the summer. Well, I guess my oldest at the time. My oldest was out for the summer, so both kids would be with our au pair during the day and they would be speaking Spanish. Our first au pair left in August or September. She left that fall. So we had to wait about 8 weeks until our next au pair could arrive from Colombia. So I went part-time to accommodate that schedule, and my family helped me out too. I enrolled my youngest in preschool, in the same preschool. So he started his English language half-day preschool. Meanwhile, my oldest started kindergarten that September, or maybe it was August. So in the United States, we usually start kindergarten at age 5. We had to wait until October, and kind of around that period, we had no Spanish input really. Now October arrived, our new au pair came, but we kept our youngest in preschool because he just got so attached to the teachers and to the students, and he really enjoyed his time there. In January 2025, I switched back to a full-time schedule, and I'm still on that schedule right now, which meant less time for French, but more time for Spanish. Now in about June, so just at the beginning of our summer, this summer, I actually switched from the pure one parent, one language approach to speaking about 10% of the time in English. Probably about a month ago or so, I decided to start spending a little bit more time in English for reasons that I'll discuss later. Sometime in the fall 2025, I decided to start, rather than just moving into English, just kind of code switching when I needed a word that I didn't have, I decided to have our breakfast meeting, like we have a chat every morning at our breakfast table. I decided to move that at least partially in English, just so that I can include our au pair who didn't understand any of the French and who I think really wanted to be part of our conversations. So that gives you an idea of what we've been up to for the last 2 years. So now let's talk about the progress and the struggles that we've had with each of the languages, starting with French. So I'm a non-native speaker of French. My mom speaks French. I have a lot of family that speaks French, but I was not raised to be a French speaker. I heard it around the house. I still got to 7th and 8th grade, or I guess about 12 years old, 13 years old, and I still did not speak French. I started learning French in school at about that age, and I continued all the way up through college. In college, I spent 6 months abroad in France, where I really learned to speak French much better. And ever since then, I've been maintaining the language in various ways. But truly, I did not become very fluent. I would say I was fluent, but it was not until I decided to speak to my children full time that I would really consider myself to be truly bilingual, in that sense that I was speaking French and English daily. I went back to work earlier this year full-time, which means 40 hours a week. And I really believe that the quality of the children's French suffered for that reason. I've read before that in order to have a bilingual child that is interacting in the target language, that they need to be interacting at least a third of the day in the target language. So because I was going back to work full-time, I don't think that the children got 33% or so of their day in French. In fact, I've seen a huge decline in their output in French. So my youngest, he's 4 now, he is not really speaking French at all.
Well, Sarah is really different.
Ouais,
And
comment?
really powerful. Il est some-powered and light-powered.
Oui.
He understands me perfectly. He understands the TV and audiobooks that I play while they're falling asleep, but he doesn't really produce French. Like, he doesn't speak to me in French, he speaks to me in English. So at first I was really trying to just repeat what he said in French, and I would really make him repeat what he should have said in order to make sure that he has that vocabulary, but it just became too much because it was literally every sentence. And sometimes I didn't always have the vocabulary necessary as well. Right now, it just kind of looks like I speak French, he responds in English. My oldest is more likely to speak in French at this point, but slowly it's becoming more and more English.
A little bit more.
Quel jeu?
I can get a press to dodge it back.
Ouais, mais en fait, c'est l'heure de dormir.
But I have to do one more. Mama, is that my last one?
Oui, c'est pour toi.
To be frank, I'm speaking a lot more English with the kids as well, probably starting about June, so maybe like 3 months ago. At the time of recording this video, I started speaking a little bit more English because I realized that there are several gaps in my vocabulary that I didn't want the kids to miss out on. I wanted them to have the words they needed, the words that were more advanced, and I wanted them to advance their vocabulary, to expand their ideas, and I didn't want them to suffer in this area just because of my limited French vocabulary. I basically was just kind of code switching, speaking French until I got to a word that I didn't know, and then I would just say that word in English so that we could keep the conversation going, and they would get the idea and the vocabulary they needed. In a perfect world, I would have stopped and looked up the word, and sometimes I do. Our conversations are getting more intricate, they're getting deeper, they're getting more detailed, and I just can't keep up with the level of vocabulary that I need to keep up with the conversation and with their interests. So that has been a challenge for us. Another reason why I don't push too hard on the kids for not speaking French is because I just think that it's unfair to have this expectation of them when I can't even provide the input that they need to produce the thoughts that they want. And because I'm the only real source of active, interactive French input right now, I think that given the situation, I'm okay with it. So we're very much in kind of survival mode in French, just trying to keep the language alive a little bit longer until I can take them to France for a visit, until I can get a French au pair. Unfortunately, Saturday school is not a possibility for us just because of our schedule. So I'm still searching for an adequate solution to that issue. One thing that I think I would really like to start is, now that they're a little bit older and a little bit more aware of technology, I would really like to start maybe once a week or maybe twice a week lessons on online, or maybe one-on-one with a tutor in French. That way they can speak to someone who speaks French, even if we can't physically be in a class during the week. Another reason that I have been switching to English is because as my oldest is now he's in first grade, but as he starts to deal with some of the social issues that come with going to school, like friends and arguments with friends and things that happen with friends and choosing good friends and how to be a good friend, all those interactions for him are pretty much happening in English. And I wanted to make sure that he would have the right vocabulary to have those interactions with his classmates. So sometimes we'll do role plays and I'll say, pretend that I'm so-and-so and you're so-and-so. And I really wanted to make sure that that language was happening in English so that he could bring it to his classmates and have the interactions that he needed to have. Now, another difficulty that we've been having is our access to age-appropriate books that are on topics that actually interest my children is really lacking. A lot of the books that we have do not discuss those topics that interest them the most. And I really want to make sure that I develop those interests, so I have been getting books from the library, like the local library, and trying to translate them into French, but it's very difficult. Sometimes I'll use an app called Google Lens, which has a translate function where I can just take a picture of the page and then just press play and have it dictate the page in French, which is nice. I can also just read from my phone and have them look at the pictures. I found it to be kind of difficult before bedtime and just a little bit distracting and frankly a lot slower, especially when we're trying to like move through a bedtime story quickly. So it's not the best solution, but I'm really thankful that we at least have that as an option. And lastly, another challenge is I've noticed that I have not been following my own rule of living my language. And in order to stay in French mode, I really need to be listening to French news, listening to things that interest me in French, listening to music in French, and just really making sure that my language develops as well so that I can stay a couple steps ahead of my kids. So lately I've been listening to a lot of English music just because, you know, I'm interested in what I'm interested in, and sometimes I share those things with them because I think it's really important for me to share, you know, a part of me and my interests with them as well, which just so happened to be obviously in English. So that's another thing that I would really like to improve on. So one of the things that has worked out really, really well for us is audiobooks. So they always have their pick of audiobooks. So even if sometimes we are looking at English language books, translating it with Google Lens, or I'm doing my best to kind of talk about the photos, about the images in French, I do always insist that what they go to sleep listening to is in French, and they have their own favorite stories that I play. I also got a subscription box in French that sends, it was during the school year. It's expired now, I had to renew it, but it worked out really well. And I basically put the age of my oldest in there, and it would send me age-appropriate books every month during the school year. And they were always excited to receive it, and it worked out really, really well. And the best books that I have right now are the ones that I got from that subscription box, and they're wonderful. So I'm going to do that again for sure. And lastly, like I mentioned, I'm going to sign them up for some classes, probably on Italki, which I love that website, but I know there are other websites nowadays. So I'm going to look for an online tutor that we can meet with once or twice a week to just kind of keep the language interesting and to give them a little bit of practice. But given the status of French right now, which is very much, as I said, in survival mode, my goal is just to keep it alive at this point, just to make sure that they don't forget it, that they can continue to understand it until we can get access to a native speaker. Overall, I think Spanish is going great. I am really, really happy with the progress these kids have made in Spanish. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time or maybe don't remember from my past videos, Spanish is not a language that I interact with my children in. But before he started preschool at his Spanish-immersion preschool, I used the time and place method to introduce Spanish slowly in the context of play at the same time pretty much every day. And then at breakfast time, I went through this really great little workbook to kind of get him interested and to familiarize him a little bit with some of the things about Spanish, the alphabet, a little bit of vocabulary, and it was super fun. But I knew that I couldn't bring him to the level that he needed to be. So ever since then, I have not interacted with them in Spanish. I've left that to our au pairs. My youngest, Spanish was actually one of his first languages. So as soon as we got an au pair, I think he wasn't even one, she started speaking to him in Spanish, and he's never stopped having Spanish input ever since. My oldest, as I mentioned, is in a Spanish immersion program where they speak half the day in Spanish and the other half of the day in English. I really think that the time that he spent in Spanish before starting his school and then, before while practicing at home has really helped the transition go very smoothly, and I think he's doing great. My youngest, as I mentioned earlier, seemed to just sort of stop speaking Spanish when our first au pair left, and in that 2-month period, he just kind of switched over to English, and now I hear him speaking English to our au pair all the time, even though she's speaking to him in Spanish.
¿Manejaste bote? ¿Quién manejó bote?
Yo.
¿Manejaste bote?
It
¿Cómo
was
lo
the first
manejaste?
time.
¿Qué viste? ¿Un paisaje o cómo fue?
I felt a lot of islands.
But nevertheless, I do hear many more Spanish words with our au pair.
¿Tú eres un niño muy qué?
Inteligente.
Y es
Bravo.
y espectacular.
Espectacular.
Y va
Valiente.
y vas a decir los colores de los carros que están aquí afuera. Vamos a practicar.
Sí.
¿Cuáles ves? El de al frente, ¿qué color
Vino
es?
tinto.
Vino tinto. ¿Cuál más?
Plateado.
Plateado. ¿Cuál más? ¿Este que está aquí?
Rojo.
El de al lado de allá es
Amarillo.
amarillo. Muéstrame dónde está el amarillo, señálalo. Señálalo, muy bien.
She tells me that he's fluent in Spanglish, so he will just have like an English sentence and then sprinkle in Spanish words appropriately with perfect pronunciation, rolling his R's and everything. Just it's not a matter that he can't do it, he just doesn't, because I know he knows the words. So I think that they're doing really well. They're understanding, they're speaking, when they need to speak, when they have a true need to speak, they do speak. I think that is going very well. I think that put in a situation where they would have to speak Spanish, like if they go to the playground sometimes and they have friends that only speak Spanish, like they do speak Spanish, but only when absolutely necessary. That said, I have really started to believe that the immersion program is not quite enough, because I do think that they speak a lot of English during the day. I think that the kids speak amongst each other in English even when they're supposed to be speaking Spanish. So that said, I really feel that the minority language at the school, in this case Spanish, needs to be supported at home as much as possible in order to help the child develop in their language skills. So in that case, I'm really glad that we have our au pair to really supplement that Spanish over the summers, and at the end of the day and the evenings where I'm working or busy, she is with them and she's speaking Spanish to them. In the program that our oldest son is part of, once one sibling is accepted to the Spanish immersion program, all of the younger siblings will also be accepted. So that means that after this year, when my youngest son starts in kindergarten, he'll automatically be accepted into the Spanish immersion program. The other reason why this is really exciting for me is because it kind of opens up the opportunity to have a French-speaking au pair in the future. So when my youngest does start the Spanish immersion program, I could really foresee us continuing on with a French-speaking au pair, just so that we can sort of bolster French and make up for some of the progress that we might not have been able to make in the last, few years. But they'll also be getting plenty of support, hopefully, in Spanish at school, maybe just enough to sort of maintain the language and switch our focus onto French for a bit. All right, so let's talk about the last language, but by no means is it the least influential language in our household, and that is English. English is everywhere. The kids are speaking English together, they're speaking English with me, they're speaking English with our au pair. It started slowly, but it's here and it's kind of here to stay. We've reached that, in some ways, dreaded period where kids are just kind of becoming passive, speaking to us in the majority language. We're here. English is very strong in my house, and it's just something that, I accept. And I'm also okay with them developing in English. I really think it's important for them to be able to have at least one language they can really communicate strongly in. Overall, I have a couple takeaways. So first, I really need to get back to living my language and to taking my own language development seriously. I knew from the beginning I would never be able to replace a native speaker. And I feel like I've really hit my limit in the last year or so, where I really needed some serious vocabulary that I did not have. And the conversation was such that it was difficult to look up the words that I didn't have, and it would just interrupt the flow of conversation or interrupt. It was inconvenient to look it up. Whereas when they were younger, when there was much less speech happening, it was much easier to look up words. But right now, when our conversations are so robust, so long, so detailed, there are just plenty of words that I'm not quite sure of how to say. I, on one hand, acknowledge that that's normal and maybe expected at this stage for me. I always see the parent as a bridge. You know, we're not meant to take the kids the whole way. We're just trying to get them far enough to give them a start so that they're not starting from zero. When the opportunity does arise for them to have that input with a native speaker, they are ready to go. They're primed, they have some background. And I think that as non-native speakers, that is kind of our goal. That's the way I see it. Another takeaway is that I've realized it's very difficult to maintain that 33% goal when you're working full time. I have flexed my schedule as much as possible to make sure that I maximize time with my kids. I'm going into work as late as I can. I'm coming home as early as I can. I'm even going back to work at the end of the day, many days a week, trying to make sure that I maximize my time with them. But even still, it doesn't feel like it's enough. I also noticed that when I am with them, they're spending a lot more time together playing, whereas it used to just be me and maybe my first child or us interacting directly together. Now they're both old enough to play with each other, and so because their language of interaction is English, they're just spending a lot more time speaking English even when I am with them. So to recap some of the things I would really like to do going forward. 1, I would really like to find an online French tutor. Number 2, I would like to listen to more resources myself in French to make sure that I continue to develop and also that I continue to remain in French mode with my kids. Number 3, I haven't really decided whether I'm going to look for a French au pair after our current au pair goes back to Colombia in about a year. I'll decide then, because it has been really great to supplement their Spanish, but at the same time, it would be really, really great to finally have a native French speaker in our home and to be able to promote French again in our house. And lastly, I'm going to continue to code switch when the vocabulary is really more important than promoting French, especially with those social emotional topics, making friends, feelings, those sorts of things that I really want to make sure that they A, understand, and B, can speak about with their friends in those situations that are maybe difficult for them. In those situations, I'm going to continue having those conversations in English. I'm going to continue pulling in our current au pair for some brief English discussion, maybe like 10-15 minutes at the breakfast table, so that she can get practice as well. And I'm also going to continue to share with my kids some of my traditions and some of my heritage in English. Some parents have asked me, what do you do about like cultural things? Like, you know, for holidays, do you share music in the majority language, or do you share music, or do you try to find music in the target language? My attitude is both. Nowadays, I'm much more interested in making sure that they know the songs that I grew up with and the traditions that I grew up with, and I'm okay with those being in English. I guess you can say that I've kind of gotten a little bit more flexible. Maybe you can see the consequence of that in the level of English that's being spoken in our house, but I think that trade-off is okay. I think it's important for kids to know their parents, and for parents to be able to share those things with their kids. And another thing is, I am gonna start being a little bit more relaxed about speaking English around other people who might not understand. I've always sought to prioritize relationships over language. So in situations where you have maybe a spouse or a grandparent who feels a bit excluded when hearing a lot of a language that they can't understand, I've always encouraged talking to the person and switching to English if it makes sense, if they're okay with it, if you're okay with it, or even just saying what you're saying in French or in your target language and then repeating it in a language that everyone understands. Lastly, I want to thank you all so much for following us on this journey for so long. It has been a long time since my very first video. It's been a journey. It really has, and I'm truly, truly thankful for all of you who have followed us for this long and who continue to follow us, and for the community that has come around this channel. And for those of you who have written to me, I'm really, really thankful for your support. I'm going to hopefully be posting a lot more frequently, so I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.